This doesn't happen very often. I thought I was interviewing Dale Graff about his time running the CIA's most successful remote viewing program, Stargate. It didn't turn out that way. What happened instead was Dale taking an introspective look at the arc of his life, complete with stories and insights. During this conversation, Dale shared how his life took him from curiosity as a child to his work with precognitive dreams, developing intuition, understanding synchronicity, and then using remote viewing to help our country and those in need. Another unusual bit was that he ended the interview with two topics that shed significant light on how he developed the talents he describes and a summary of how becoming a synchronistic navigator helps us move through life. He told me that once we accept this ability, we can have agency as we travel along. This agency acts as a door opener to other realities, leaving us with the question, what's next? Then I think you'll want to hear his stories and use his keen insights to add depth and texture to his experiences. Case in point, the story about how he used his intuition to save his wife in the ocean surf. Frankly, it's extraordinary. Please excuse the edits. I tried to make our interview a bit more linear than what happened in real life. Here's his bio. Dale Graff is a retired aerospace engineer and physicist who worked for the intelligence community at the Air Force Technology Division and the Defense Intelligence Agency. Key assignments were Chief of the Advanced Concepts Office, Chief of the Stargate Remote Viewing Unit at Fort Meade, Maryland, and Contract Manager for Remote Viewing Research at Stanford Research Institute. He coined the term Stargate to represent an innovative effort for expanding human potential. Currently, he facilitates seminars, workshops, and pursues independent research on psi phenomena, including ESP, remote viewing, and precognitive dreaming. To accept the potential that we can do this work means that our mindset is key. That followed by intention, training, and perseverance. I hope this helps as you listen to the stories that Dale has to tell. Here's our interview with Dale Graff. Hi, Dale. Really nice to have you here on the Afterlife Files. Thanks for joining us.
Well, great. I look forward to the discussion because it's one of my favorite topics, among other things. This is a great topic to dwell into.
So, I'd like to start out today with just a little background. Tell us a little bit about your story. Like, how did you get into this whole world of, you know, um,
Yeah,
psi stuff and remote viewing and that, that's not a normal path for somebody who's a physicist and a scientist.
I like the way you did that. All those things here and there. Yeah. Yeah, it's often wondered that also. And it's interesting to go back over your life. And I have a lot of years to think about that now in my more senior years. But really taking a hard look at it, I have to say it began in the beginning. As a child, I had these dreams. I was very young, kind of infant style, I guess, still in that time frame. And I would have these experiences which I couldn't explain later. They could be called dreams, but no one at the time, my parents didn't really know what I was talking about. Uh, so I just kind of kept quiet. And some of the dreams had what I saw later or discovered later is precognitive information, visitors that we weren't expecting. All of a sudden they show up. Now, why did I know that uncle was coming when he hardly ever visits? Little things like that, nothing spectacular. So that piqued my interest in it, in the dream world. And then one time, I think I was about 6 years old, before I went to what we call elementary school. I went to a one-room schoolhouse in the country, so we started off pretty late in years, age 6. But right before that, after I went there as in school, I thought, well, I'm not going to have a lot of time once I get to school. I'm going to do some exploring with these dreams. So I decided to find out where I went when I went to sleep, because that's a question kids have, you know. So how do you do that? Well, every time I go to sleep, there I was. And then in the morning would show up and I didn't remember anything. So I just held on to my awareness, I'm not going to go to sleep. I'm not going to go to sleep. I'm not going to go to sleep. And eventually I popped up in a dream-like environment. So, it was sort of today what you would call a lucid dream, entering a lucid dream from the conscious state. Now, I didn't realize there was a name for that kind of thing. I'd never heard of the term lucid dream until decades later, nor did I learn about the dream yoga tradition. So apparently I stumbled upon this process as a kid, as a very young kid, and I maintained my interest in dreams and lucid dreaming. But then I drifted away from that and got into the business, I eventually got into because I was interested in what can happen with our inner perception, and that led me into intuition and then side dreams, precognitive dreams, and eventually into the remote viewing world. So there's a lot of steps in between there that I'm skipping over, but that was basically the beginning impetus for my interest.
So as a young kid, you decided that you wanted to enter into this dream world. So you kept your mind awake as your body was trying to sleep, and you just like chose to be there, I guess.
Yeah, it just it didn't happen the first night or the second, but probably the third or fourth. Here I am, I'm still in bed, and all of a sudden, pop, I slide into this other space, which just like the real world, And in fact, it probably was based on a lot of memories of around the farm area. I grew up on a farm. So I'm out there in nature, in the trees and the forest. I see all those things. But they were probably replications of memory, brought up from memory. I don't think I was doing any OBE thing at that time. But whatever the case, here I am, and what I really couldn't describe well at the time because I didn't have the language for it, but in this dreamlike environment. So
Well, one of the things that is a hallmark of lucid dreaming is that you have agency, that you know you're in a world and you can kind of direct the action. Was that the case with you?
I didn't really intervene or go through some of the experiences that lucid dreamers describe in their ventures, like going through walls or anything like that.
You
Or ju-
mentioned an interesting word, and that was synchronicity. Talk about that a little more.
I was working late one night, and this gets back kind of more to the topic of after death. But I was working late one night on my physics thesis in a company building, and usually there's nobody there but the janitor. So there I am, struggling away with the old Frieden calculators. Remember those?
I do indeed.
Yeah, no, I had a little bit of slide rule stuff too. This is before computers. It really dates me. So so one evening, the janitor comes by a little earlier than usual, very agitated, very excited. He said, you can't believe what just happened. So, well, the place is empty. So I said, okay, what happened? He said, well, I was over upstairs at the one of the vice president's office, and he was working late too. And he came out and he asked me if I'd seen his friend George, because George just was in his office visiting and left quickly. And George came and said goodbye to him. And he said, well, George left a few hours ago. Why is he coming back to say goodbye now? He was as real as anything I could see. Did you see him? He asked the janitor, and the janitor did not see anybody.
Mhm.
And this vice president said, well, I don't know what that was about. Well, the following morning, we learned that at the time of the experience, George had been killed in an automobile accident.
Oh,
So this vice president actually saw what you would call an apparition of the friend that was just died. Um, and that was starting to me to hear a story like that. How could this be? Now it turns out this vice president was Ambrose Morrell, who was the husband of Olga Morrell, the famous healer from Baltimore. So he was well acquainted with these kinds of experiences. So it was through that link I became interested in this whole topic of healing and spiritual contact and that sort of thing, healing, premonitions, and whatever. But it was kind of a synchronicity, in a way that I would be there at that time and hear this from the vice president of the company. So, because that just led to a whole set of other kinds of synchronicity too, uh, and also direct experience.
and
Yeah.
so did you ever come to a conclusion about how synchronicities in your life could be increased?
Well, after I became a student of synchronicity, that was really convincing that this was really a key element of our experience. If we just normally think about it. And I became more convinced about this synchronistic connection that we have through everything, through people, through animals, through the world around us. The more we are open to it. And I saw the connection because I came in studying precognition initially, doing experiments, and many of them along the way on precognitive abilities to describe this or that in the future. I could see a direct link with synchronicity and precognition. Only with most precognitive experiences, you don't really feel that they're synchronistic. But with a synchronicity experience, you can sometimes have the hint of a precognitive dream that precedes the synchronistic event. And I've had a number of those happen to me, where I do something unusual. The more I do this, and then I realized it was a key step for the later event that was more meaningful. So there's like little steps of the way that led to that objective that you really were hoping to resolve in some way. Or sometimes it was an incident which was meaningful after the fact. Oh, I'm really glad I had that experience. Well, so it's something led you into that. Something kind of drifted. Those of us that have these experiences, it sort of drift us into that experience. I had a lot of people tell me stories about these odd circumstances, these unusual coincidences, which I think Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, described as synchronicities, meaningful coincidences. So yeah, I've been a student of that, and also an experiencer of those kinds of things. But I tend to see them linked with precognition, and our natural ability to perceive the future and move toward that future in meaningful ways. As not only to achieve some goal, and this is something I've overlooked. Synchronicity sometimes works in the other way, in which we avoid something. We don't know why we didn't go here, only later to learn that was a good reason we didn't go there, or become involved with a certain individual only to realize later that was a good thing we didn't. So it's something looking ahead for us, for our well-being. I don't know what you want to call that, a synchronicity principle or some kind of overviewer that we have within us. So yeah, I've really had a lot of those. And in my work with precognition,
Just a second. Define that for people. So, and then continue on, will you?
okay, what was the question again?
Please define precognition
Oh, okay.
and kind of what you were studying, and then
Okay, yeah,
give us
now
some examples.
you're right. In the precognitive experience that I'm referring to, it's our natural ability to have either intuitions or actually direct perceptions of an event that will occur in the future that we will interact with or actually become aware of. So we are perceiving the future. Uh, and sometimes that future is really absolute. We can't do much to avoid it. It just happens, but we are prepared for it. And sometimes that event has a flexibility. We could dodge around it or even sometimes even prevent it. And I'll give you an example of that.
Okay.
Some years ago, again, this is the time when I was deeply involved in studying precognition and experiencing it and setting up experiments. And I had this, I've been keeping a track of dreams for decades. So I do follow all kinds of dreams. I record them in my dream journal. But one night, there's a very brief dream where the dream presents a car exploding. Just boom, wow, all kinds of fire all around it. And it was the kind of car my wife drove, and I seldom drove it. So this is really a horrible dream to have. Now, in dream work, the first thing you want to do is say, "Well, fire. Are you angry at her or something like that?" Well, not to the point of having a car explode. That's for sure. So because I had a track record of or having precognitive experiences, I said, "Well, this is probably precognitive. Something's wrong with the car." So I looked at it. I couldn't find anything, no gas leaks or anything like that. But I did take it to the garage um, shortly after. And about a day or two later, I get a call from the garage mechanic and said, "Well, it's a good thing you brought the car in. You were really driving a time bomb. The fuel pump in your car was in the gas tank, which I didn't know, and it created a short. And had the fuel dropped below a certain level, it could have ignited the fuel."
Ooh, that's not good.
Yeah, no. So naturally, out comes the old fuel pump and goes a new one. So the event didn't happen. It it wasn't precognitive in the sense there was a real explosion, but it was precognitive in the sense of early warning of a potential possibility. So of course, very thankful that I did have that dream and that I did get that car fixed in time. So that was something that happened to me personally. And it's very difficult to really intervene with these dreams. But I do think that occasionally we do have, and changing them, we can avoid situations. We get information, a simple example would be don't get on the airplane that you think is going to crash, particularly if you've eliminated all of the possibilities like the fear of flight and whatever. So, and I've had friends that have had exactly done that premonition that, oh, there's something going to be wrong with the airplane, and they change plans. Now, maybe the plane doesn't crash, but maybe it has a mechanical problem and it doesn't take off. So there are those situations that we are alerted to, and we can avoid. But
Yep.
we have the opportunity to do so. And other times, all we can do is go for the ride and be prepared for it. So, yeah, and I think I'll give you another example here. I ran into, I always like to do experiments. I haven't done any recently, but years ago when I was really charging ahead in this topic, I did a series of future news experiments where the objective was to have well, it would be a precognitive dream because it's about a future news incident. So the objective on the series was what is the most significant event that will happen on a certain day, 3, 5, 6 days ahead, or on a certain page of the newspaper. Because I try to be specific because the critic will say, well, you wait long enough, something like that's going to happen anyway. But so I have a very tight protocol for this. So this particular dream is a perception of the dream presents a very clear airplane or what I called an experimental aircraft entering or flying along in the sky and burning up and essentially falling into pieces all over the earth, basically. And then there was a follow-on dream to that that showed in the dream a very clear presentation of an experimental type airplane, I called it, with a wing problem, with a crack at where the fuselage and the wing meet.
Mhm.
And then the next series of events It had to do with an individual. But I'll jump ahead for a moment. Obviously, this is the space shuttle that blew up and burned
Oh, the Challenger. Yeah.
Challenger because of that crack in the wing. And this dream occurred 5 days before the tragic event. But the last dream of that series it was me meeting an individual in a dream at a fence, at some fence somewhere. And so this individual comes to the fence, and this is now a lucid dream, basically. So I go to the I go to the fence to talk to this individual, and then I now know somehow that this is the pilot of that experimental craft. And the pilot then tells me in the dream that he's going to Annapolis to say goodbye to his friends. Okay, well, at that time, I didn't know that the commander of the space shuttle was an Annapolis graduate, and that his family still lived in Annapolis. So here was a case where 5 days ahead, I'm perceiving an individual that is almost announcing to me and then to whoever else might be dreaming about this, that he's not going to be alive anymore. He's going to be going to visit his friends in Annapolis. So how did this happen? Did at a subconscious level, I'm beginning to think that maybe even space shuttle people were aware that this was not going to end well. Uh, so it was almost like that in that dream, I'm perceiving an apparition of the pilot, of the commander, in advance of the death of the tragic event. Because the message was pretty clear, the names were correct. And I didn't know that at the time. And the symbology was really quite clear. I can't cross the fence. I wanted to go over the fence to talk more to him. And he couldn't come over on my side. So the fence was a barrier of some kind.
Yep.
So, that was a really a powerful dream. It felt different at the time I had it, and then of course, then 5 days later, there it was in real life. Really startling. So I've had a number of dreams like that. Maybe not quite that dramatic, not quite that national, relative to national. So that's a kind of connection that can happen when you work with trying to perceive future incidents. And this was under your control condition where I had specified well in advance what the objective would be. And it came to pass. And eventually I brought this into a tighter focus and set up a research protocol with a colleague in Florida. And we went through a series of dreaming about future news photographs that would be on a certain day, well, 3 to 7 days ahead. And we wanted to be sure that the event, if we experienced it accurately, was clearly ahead of the actual incident itself. So it was a pure future. It wasn't something existing now that we have to get news of later. The event had yet not occurred. The picture had not yet been taken. So I call that pure precognition. Um,
And are these precognition events associated with dreaming, or do they happen in other states of consciousness as well?
of course, the precognition will occur in almost any state of awareness, a conscious state, is a state in between, all kinds of altered states, maybe as well. So you might have different names for them, premonitions, hunches. You may not have the specific imagery or the specific knowledge of what it is.
Hmm.
But a lot of times it's, oh, I had a feeling, I had a gut feel, a hunch. Okay, that's sort of the inkling or the hint that you experienced a precognitive impulse of information, but it wasn't presented in a way that you could identify clearly. It was in your automatic nervous system. It was there as a feeling. And probably at a deep subconscious level, you did know what it was. And you'd probably gone through some protocol. You probably could have brought it out to consciousness and seen specifically what it was about. but most of the time these hunches are there, and that's maybe all you need to do. Because if you think about it too much, you might not do anything. So it's best to go with the hunch to get out of the way than to stop in the middle of the road pondering what that was about as the truck comes rolling around the corner to
Yeah.
slash you down.
Sounds
So
a lot like the work that you do in remote viewing. Are precognition and remote viewing related?
well, sure. In remote viewing, you'll call it remote viewing the future. Okay, I just call it precognition in the dream state. Doesn't really matter. But there is a connection, I think, between the conscious state and the dream state. And this is one of the things I've been trying to do over the years, so that there really is a connection. We're not talking about separate phenomena. Remote viewing is not out there on a high pole all by itself. It's surrounded at basically a level with all these other ways of experiencing this potential that we have. We just have different names for it and different ways to get there. Uh, there are training programs for remote viewing in the dream state. There really isn't so much of a protocol as it's just simply an intent to remember dreams. Is that a protocol? I don't know. It's just a desire and intent, just like learning anything. So
Oh,
I see they're all kind of connected. It's the same basic phenomenon, different names, different ways to get there.
yep. So, how did you get yourself to become the director of Stargate?
Oh, that chain. Okay. Oh,
Wow, that's kind of a
well, listen. This causes me to go into an experience which is really emotional for me. And it's just what got me to think about this topic more seriously. Uh, and after that experience, I started doing more research. This is before I really got into this research phase. But I'll start with the experience. This is really before I was really doing a lot. We didn't even know much about the topic. I hadn't even heard of J.B. Ryan or the Duke work at that time. But this goes back to the Vietnam era in 1968. Uh, I had a temporary assignment to Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii when I was with an organization at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, a place called the Foreign Technology Division. By that time, I had transitioned from the aerospace industries into the technical intelligence. Then I received a temporary assignment on top of that to go to Hawaii for about a year and a half during the Vietnam War to do air defense analysis work because that was my background, aeronautical engineering. So I'm there at Hickam, and I did a long trip to Europe, throughout Southeast Asia, giving presentations on aircraft tactics. I actually became a Soviet MiG airplane versus U.S. airplane tactic expert at the time.
who tapped you to start that Stargate program?
Yeah, well, when I
And
came out of that and I got into Stargate, the experience there uh, in Hickam opened me up to it's really something going on here that I needed to look into. It was a near drowning experience. So when I recovered from that um, and returned to Hickam, I mean, returned to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, I started looking into the Soviet work and found that they were doing work in ESP, and I got that published, and that eventually got me linked up with Hal Puthoff at the Stanford Research Institute because they were looking for a supporter to continue their research. And since I already had published Soviet work on the topic that related to it, even though it was called ESP or bioenergetics phenomena, they had different terms for it. That's that linked me in with the beginning of Stargate because then now I'm a contract manager for remote viewing research at Stanford Research Institute. And ultimately, I transferred to Washington, D.C. And one thing led to another. The Army unit that had been established somewhat earlier, well, in 1969, 79, eventually I became the director of that unit. And when that happened, I was able to change the name because we had to change project code words every now and then. every at least 3 years. And I chose the name Stargate that was approved. So I got involved in the operational side of remote viewing. I was able to come up with the name Stargate, which now seems to be pretty well solidly connected with the field, even though there are other terms that are used from the earlier days that are just as good and just as valid. Um, so it was a long chain of events like that that then brought me into the government side of applying remote viewing, while I was still connected with the research aspect with Alpha at Stanford Research Institute at Russell Tarr. So that connection, but that experience in Hawaii was really key because, and it relates to the theme of your talk, your program more. Um, it was really a situation where uh, I was out in the surf. Nobody else was out there because there was a storm coming and the guards had gone home. And I was on a surfboard, well, a bodyboard, just for body surfing. And I had decided I can't stay out here any longer. I got to go back. And I'm looking around and can't see anybody on the beach. So, okay, I'm going back. But then I hear a voice, and that I thought the voice said, help, very faintly. But my logical mind says nobody could be out here. Nobody could be as stupid as me to be out here. And I thought, oh, that was a seagull, or the way the winds, and the wind was really strong, and the waves were like 3 to 6 foot trough to peak, and I'm just bouncing up and down off of them. So, okay, that can't be real. There's nobody out here. So I kept paddling back to shore, laying on the surfboard or this bodyboard. And then something happened I had no control over. I just turned around and automatically started paddling as hard as I could to get out further toward the open ocean, toward the coral reefs, and that's not a good thing to do in high waves. But that didn't bother me. I had to keep going. I just felt compelled to go. My analytical mind was not functioning. That was totally out of the picture. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done this. So I kept going, and I got to the point where, this is really suicidal. I got to get back. But I come up one wave, I go down another one into a deep trough, and I bump into a woman that's sinking in the water.
Oh my.
And of course, later I learned that she had been caught in a rip current, which I wasn't aware was going on at the time, but it was a rip current moving her out. And she had taken on too much water and couldn't even scream. She never called for help. So what did I hear? What was that faint help? And why did I even go there in that direction? I couldn't see anything. Saw water in my eye. I didn't have my glasses on, of course. I couldn't see anything. So finally got her up on the board. I got her on there. And then the shock came. The woman was my wife. She had been carried out in a rip current. I found her. So it was a long struggle to get back. And in that paddling back, I had to keep her on the board. So in her head out of the water, she's almost unconscious. And I can hardly move because I'm now getting fatigued. And it was during this process of trying to get back to save her life. And I realized that I couldn't, at one point, I didn't think I could save her, but maybe me. But then I came with this gut decision, I guess. No, it's either both of us or none. And it was at that point when everything just shifted. I don't know what happened. It was just totally light, and I had no pain. I could see where to go, even though I wasn't looking. And a long time later, my knees hit sand. I know we made it. I brought her up, got the water out of her lung, crawled back into the pine trees and collapsed, wondering how did this happen? So it was a powerful experience. And, it was filled with it's hard.
So I take it that she turned out okay.
Yes, she did. Yes, she did. I got the water out. Well, there was some water in the lungs, and she was okay. And the weird thing about I don't want to call it weird. The peculiar thing about it is, um, I realized I could never really tell her what happened. It took me years to find out piece by piece because I didn't want her to feel obligated to me. So, so we didn't talk about this for 20 years. And then we finally broke down and both of us told our version of the story. And she said that as she was being swept out, and she can't swim, she's not a swimmer,
Oh,
that she had the feeling not to worry that she was going to be saved. So somehow she had that sense that without even calling for help, that I would find her. So, so you can see why when I returned to the front technology division, I had a totally different mindset. I had a totally different viewpoint of life and what I wanted to do in the future. So I dove in as hard as I could with trying to understand the experience. I learned about the research that was going on, J.B. Ryan's work, which I hadn't heard before. I learned about the dream work that was going on at the Maimonides Medical Center in New York, which is really quite meaningful for me. So I became basically a student of parapsychology at that time. I also studied psychology. I took courses. I took a look at what was abnormal psychology to make sure that what I was experiencing was not really totally crazy. Even though some books would label it as kind of borderline. So it got my mind set going or set in a direction that I think stirred up these synchronicities in a way that clicked together the arrival of Hal at the Foreign Technology Division at the time when I had just uh, basically finished writing my reports on what the Soviets were doing, which attracted the commander's attention. Otherwise, he probably would not have listened to them very long. So that I see as a synchronistic experience in itself.
yeah. Well, you asked me to remind you to talk about a Canadian River
Oh,
experience.
Canadian River. Um, one of my pastimes, hobbies, other vocations was wilderness canoeing in Canada. So I would every almost every year for about 10 years um, go into the wilderness of Canada on these wild river canoe journeys. Some of them ended up in the Arctic Ocean. Most of them are over in James Bay area. So these are really way up there in the tundra areas. Wild rivers, there's nobody up there, basically. There are some native settlements, but usually not along the rivers we took. So one of these river trips, uh, and when I'm in the wilderness like that, I'm really concerned about safety of myself, of course, and with my colleagues. So keep that in mind, not just as you're going through the rapids, which are dangerous enough, but anytime, uh, when we're around camp or whatever the situation might be, are we doing something dangerous or not? So when well, this is the tundra, so it's light most of the time. It's only a semi-darkness. But one time while I was in the tent, I have this dream, which is really brief and to the point, which is how precognitive dreams generally work, where I see this hand reaching up to try to grasp something. If somebody is trying to pull out of something or pull up. And but there wasn't a lot of information in the dream. But now this issue, you have an image, but you also have more data at your subconscious mind that you don't fully understand, which is probably good, so you don't analyze it too much. And that was an impulse. So I really got out of that tent real fast. And I knew there's somebody in trouble down at the river. And we were camped about a quarter mile back to get out of the wind, the mosquitoes. So I go really dressed as quickly as I could and went down to the river. And here's one of my colleagues from the canoe journey, our canoe group, who had slipped into the icy water. This is like 36-degree water. It's deep
Oh
there.
my. Yeah, that's chilly.
And he, you know, if you ever had that experience, you're totally frozen out. You can't really move muscles at all. And he couldn't even scream. He's paralyzed. I've had that experience several times. It takes you a while to get moving in that water. So, and he's trying to get out of, it's this really steep bank. He's trying to reach up for a root of the willow tree. So I get there, and here he is in cold water. How did you get in here? Of course, he couldn't talk. I reached down and sort of helped him out, and got most of my dry clothing off. We got his wet clothing off. We got the fire going, and he was coming down with hypothermia. So, in a way, I guess I sort of really helped him. Now, I'm not saying he couldn't have gotten out of that by himself, but I don't think he would have. He would have had real trouble. He may have. I don't know. I'm not making a judgment. So that's one of the dramatic experiences on the river. There were others of having impressions, sometimes hunches, sometimes dreams of what would be around the corner or 5 miles ahead. Even though there's nobody on the river, supposedly, every now and then you find people that are out there. So, and now all of a sudden, here's an impression, yeah, I'm going to meet somebody, or I'm going to know exactly how that river is going to behave in this canyon and not take the route we wanted, but could take an alternative route around the obstacles. Those little pieces of information like that that were really helpful, that you couldn't, none of us in the canoe group could have anticipated. So helpful things and also safety things as well. I think survival is the key here. But it's again another example where it's an incomplete image of a dream coupled with an intense impulse, do something.
There we go. What's your take on how we can enhance our intuition, these precognitive abilities?
I think, okay, going back to developing or enhancing it, the key, in my view, is just simply accept the potential. That's really a big starting point here. You're way ahead of the starting gate if you could do that. Okay, you acknowledge the fact that we all have this basic ability or talent, and some of us can already have it more fine-tuned than others. And if we're not there yet, we can certainly go through some kind of you might want to call it training or development activity program. But that's what we have set up now in the remote viewing world. But the basic step is accept that you can do it and then persevere in whatever the task is. Practice. So, okay.
Practice.
In dream work, it's about okay, keep trying, keep trying. In remote viewing, you have different tasks. Okay, you finish this, and then comes the next one. So it's pretty much like a sport activity, to keep practicing till you hone in that part of your brain that allows you to synchronize. You're back to synchronization again.
So you use a term called synchronistic navigator.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, I'm developing that, but it came up with me when I developed it for sure. It's called the Stargate, the best kept secret of the Cold War. As I went through that, I realized, why can't we pull this together in some kind of label that might be more meaningful at an individual level? Of course, we all know about navigation. We navigate through life. There are navigators all over the place. There's computer, there's computer navigators in that field. So navigation is a common word, but synchronistic navigation, is, the way I wrote it initially or came up with it was when we're open to to ourselves, to the fuller potential of ourselves, you almost automatically get into this precognitive synchronistic style. You may not call it that. You may not even say, "Hey, I'm going to become a precognitive experiencer right now." You may not even want to. But if you keep in the idea that whatever you're doing in life, you are navigating. You're navigating the streets. You're navigating wherever you go. But instead of just simply charging blindly ahead, say, in addition to what I would normally do, I'm going to add synchronicity to this. So the synchronicity part of navigation is allowing your subconscious future seeing mind, your precognitive mind, to help out, to join in on the navigation process that you are going through, where you're going, uh, either as a real journey or as an activity that you're planning, maybe a new profession or something. So it's an acknowledgement of a subconscious ability that we have that helps us move through life, either through choices that we then are found to have, or through unconscious happenings, subconscious happenings that we didn't expect that turn out to be very beneficial. So we're accepting this ability and saying you can be part of what we're doing as we travel along.
We are bumping up against our time limit. So, is there anything you'd like to tell us that kind of wraps this all up?
I would say, in terms of summarizing the idea of these potentials that we have, there's really more to it than the potential because it tells us something about the nature of the universe. I often think about precognition again because how can a future exist, that can be predictable? So where is that future? What domain is it in? What other reality? So it forces me to think that this ability should lead us, should prompt us to looking at a wider perspective. Of course, size wide enough. The size of precognitive ability, size ability, remote viewing, it's wide enough. But it's a door opener for thinking about other realities. And once we accept that, there's no reason why we can't think about the other experiences that we really haven't touched on here a lot. The survival issue, what is going on there? What part of us is actually continuing on after this life? And the fact that we have this ability, which is far more than just simply survival. Why would early uh, people have the ability to see around the corner to avoid the tiger and also see across the world to the other end? Why would we have that ability at all? So it just opens up an acceptance that we live really in a really incredible universe. We just really don't understand the ramifications of everything, and that we can be part of it, and that we can enjoy these experiences for our benefit, the benefit of others, and that we can think about them in a sense of what next? How does this link with some of the practices that encouraging seeking the lucid dreams or the near death experiences or looking beyond this life that we now have and experience.
That is just wonderful. Dale Graff, thank you so much for being with us on the Afterlife Files. And those of you that are watching, stick around because I got a couple interesting insights that I think you're going to want to hear. Again, Dale, thank you for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you.